But let's start here with Rubio. Secretary of State, pick for Trump, probably one of the easiest ones to get through. He's more part of the establishment than most. As I've said the whole time, there's things about Rubio that I like. There's things about Rubio that I really don't like. But I also think that the State Department, as much as people think it's this important, sexy, prestigious institute, you're not going to do anything to hurt us there. You're not going to do anything to get in the way, because just no one who actually does the real work to keep this country safe really takes you guys seriously. You're the only ones who do. But he did make a statement which sounded good. Is it true? Don't know, but this is part of his opening statement. He's talking about, essentially, he called it something different, but essentially the New World Order and how dangerous it is. Take a look.
Out of the triumphalism of the end of the long Cold War emerged a bipartisan consensus. And this consensus was that we had reached the end of history, that all of the nations of the world would now become members of the democratic Western-led community, that a foreign policy that served the national interest could now be replaced by one that served the liberal world order, and that all mankind was now destined to abandon national sovereignty and national identity and would instead become one human family and citizens of the world. This wasn't just a fantasy. We now know it was a dangerous delusion. Here in America and in many of the advanced economies across the world, an almost religious commitment to free and unfettered trade at the expense of our national economy shrunk the middle class, left the working class in crisis, collapsed our industrial capacity, and has pushed critical supply chains into the hands of adversaries and of rivals. An irrational zeal for maximum freedom of movement of people has resulted in a historic mass migration crisis here in America, but also around the world. It's one that threatens the stability of societies and of governments. Across the West, governments now censor and even prosecute domestic political opponents. Meanwhile, radical jihadists openly march in the streets and sadly drive vehicles into our people. While America far too often continued to prioritize the global order above our core national interests, other nations continue to act the way countries have always acted and always will, in what they perceive to be their best interest. And instead of folding into the post-Cold War global order, they have manipulated it to serve their interests at the expense of ours. The post-war global order is not just obsolete, it is now a weapon being used against us. And all this has led to a moment in which we must now confront the single greatest risk of geopolitical instability and of generational global crisis in the lifetime of anyone alive and in this room today.
All right. So he's saying the right things. His performance was not as visible yesterday or as watched as Pam Bondi, because you knew Pam's would be more contentious. You knew Marco's wouldn't. He's one of them. He's sitting on the opposite side of a table of a bunch of people he's worked with for years. But he said some good things there. The problem with Marco always is this. You're good, and it's not just Marco. I'm not just picking on Marco Rubio. It's 99% of the people serving in D.C. is you're good at saying the right things and what your constituents want to hear at certain times. But you're not so good at actually pushing these things forward or enacting them. Again, I would argue he's not going to be able to do much good or much bad in the role of Secretary of State, but he had a good day. I hope that he surprises us and does a really good job there. Hell, maybe he or someone could actually make the State Department worth a damn for once. I don't know. I don't think he's the guy to do that, but he had a generally good day. Tom, I'll see what comments you have on it.
Yeah, Marco Rubio is kind of like, what's the best description of him? He's like a cheese pizza, where it's like, yeah, I'll take a slice of it. It's not really my favorite, but it'll fill me up, and it'll get me through to a meal that I really want. He checks off a box for permanent Washington. They like him. He's a bit squishy at times, goes whichever way the wind's blowing. He's just one. He's an insider. He's one of them. And you're right. I think being, in the position that he's going for, you can't do too much damage.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I feel about it. I feel there are other positions that I feel strongly about that are much more important getting the right people in. I don't want squishes in those roles. Like Secretary of Defense, Director of the FBI, Director of the CIA.
Yeah.
Those positions I think are far more important